As of August 2023, I have read 22 books by the Queen of Crime, Agatha Christie. This is how I would rank them. Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I am going to be ranking every book that I have read by Agatha Christie so far. Like I said, as of this moment, I have read 22 books by Agatha Christie, and it is a goal of mine to read every mystery novel she ever wrote. I wanted to make this video to discuss the books that I have read by her so far. Let it just be known, though, that ranking is arbitrary, and depending on the day, I might rank books differently. Also, I totally recognize that some of the books, objectively speaking, should be higher on the list, and my favorite Agatha Christie books, objectively speaking, are not the best books she ever wrote. This is just my personal opinion, my personal feelings, and I already feel like some people are going to be mad at me because I have ranked some of her most iconic books relatively low on this list, but it's just my personal opinion, and hopefully you understand that, I am going to explain why some of her most popular books are lower for me, and some of them have outside factors. Some books by Agatha Christie were spoiled for me, and that made the reading experience less enjoyable in some cases. With that being said, let's just dive into the ranking. Like I said, my exact rankings could change depending on whatever I'm feeling that day, but I can confidently say that number 22 on this list is by far the worst Agatha Christie book that I have read. So coming in at number 22, my least favorite Agatha Christie book that I have read, and the only one that I personally consider to be bad, is The Big Four. The reason I did not like this book is it just feels tonally so different from Agatha Christie's other books. This is a Poirot mystery where Poirot and Hastings end up investigating this crime syndicate known as the Big Four. And the Big Four are these four individuals: a Chinese revolutionary, a French scientist, an American millionaire, and a British master of disguise, who have an evil plan to take over the world for reasons. Honestly, I don't even understand how these four people met each other in an age before the internet, and this book just reads more like a spy novel than a cozy Poirot mystery. It's just a very weird book. I know this is not a hot take. A lot of people don't like this book, and it's the only Agatha Christie novel I've read so far that I actively disliked. A very easy decision to put this at the bottom of the list. Coming in at number 21 on the list, we have a Miss Marple mystery, and that is They Do It With Mirrors. I filmed a video where I tried to solve this book recently. I will link that in the card. And the reason this book is coming in at number 21 is because I think the whodunit is blatantly obvious. It's really not that hard to figure out where this book is going, especially if you've read a lot of Agatha Christie before and you know her usual tricks. So I don't think this book was actively bad like I did think about the Big Four, but it was very disappointing because it was very clear to me where the story was going. That's why this comes in at number 21. Now, numbers 20, 19, and 18 on the list I'm going to kind of talk about together because these are all short story collections by Agatha Christie, and I sort of have similar feelings about all of them. If I had to choose, I would say number 20 is going to be Poirot Investigates. This is, I believe, the second in the Poirot series, and it was fine, but just not really that memorable to me. I don't have any problems with it, but not one of my favorites. All of the books on this list from this point on I think are good, and something has to be towards the bottom. At number 19, I would put the 13 Problems, also known as the Tuesday Nightclub, I believe that was the UK title, and that's a series of Miss Marple short stories. Again, good, but not as memorable as other books on this list. And then tentatively at 18, I would put Murder in the Mews, which is a collection of Poirot novellas. Now, I sort of have similar feelings about all of these. Personally, I am just not a huge fan of mystery short stories because I feel like with a short story, it is much easier to figure out where the story is going. There's less time for red herrings, and that's why mystery short stories are never really 5 stars for me. I think all of these collections were enjoyable, but there wasn't necessarily a wow factor like I think there is with other Agatha Christie books. Tentatively, I'm ranking Murder in the Mews the highest out of the 3 because there were some stories in that I did genuinely really enjoy. Poirot Investigates is the least memorable to me, and that's why I decided to put it last out of these 3, but no hard feelings against these. I just think mystery short stories are not my personal favorite. Though there is a short story collection by Agatha Christie that is ranking very high on this list, actually, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. Oh, now it's time for my first hot take of the list, and I can just feel the dislikes coming, but at number 17, I have one of Agatha Christie's most famous books, Death on the Nile. Yeah, this one was not a favorite of mine. I do think the fact that it is so hyped could have worked against it. Sometimes when a book is really hyped, I go in with very high expectations, and then through no fault of the book's own, it can't really meet the expectations that I've built up in my mind. This is another Poirot mystery where Poirot has to investigate the murder of a wealthy, recently married woman on a cruise down the Nile River in Egypt. In addition to this book being extremely hyped, some other things that I think worked against it is, one, this book is pretty long for a mystery, and it takes a very long time for the murder to actually happen. It is a bit slower, and I think that did drag the rating down a bit for me. Also, the ending really was just not my favorite. I know a lot of people really like it and really think it is surprising, but personally, I was a bit disappointed when we found out who was behind the murders. And this book uses a trope, or should I say a technique, that Agatha Christie uses in several books on this list. And yes, it is a good way to trick the reader and subvert their expectations, but I think I personally don't like it. And whenever I read an Agatha Christie book that does this, I'm always kind of a bit disappointed. So I think it's just not my personal favorite trick of hers. And that's why I have Death on the Nile ranked so low. I know you all probably hate me now, but just my opinion. Coming in at number 16 on the list, I have Sparkling Cyanide. I did like this book. I gave it 4 stars, and really the only reason it's this low on the list is it's not as memorable to me as many of the other Agatha Christie books that I have read. This is technically a standalone novel, though it does feature the recurring character of Colonel Race. 1 year ago, Rosemary Barton was murdered at her birthday dinner, and now a year later, all of the people who were there that night are getting together once again, and another person might end up dead. This was a good book, but I think the story and the characters just didn't stick with me as much as they did in other books by Agatha Christie. And characters are very important to me, so that's why this book is a little lower on the list, even though I did think it was good. If we were ranking titles, though, this would be one of my favorites. Sparkling Cyanide. I just love that title. Then coming in at number 15 is another hot take, and I have the ABC Murders at this point of the list. I do think this is a very good book. I just think I like other Agatha Christie's more. This is a Poirot mystery where Poirot and Hastings end up investigating a serial killer who is murdering a person for each letter of the alphabet. So Mrs. Asher is number 1, then we have Betty Barnard, Carmichael Clark, etc. So he's going through the letters of the alphabet and murdering someone whose name starts with that letter. And I do think the way this book is plotted is really clever, and I do like some of the techniques that Agatha Christie uses in this book, but I just remember liking this one fine. I didn't really love it, and I do personally really like the Agatha Christie books that are a bit more witty and do have some lighthearted touches with some fun characters, and I don't know if this book really fits that mold as much, so I do think it is a really good book, just not one of my personal favorites. At number 14, I have The Pale Horse. This is a standalone novel by Agatha Christie from later in her career, which does deal with some topics of the occult. The main character, Mark Easterbrook, is investigating a place called the Pale Horse, and 3 women there who claim that if you pay them, they can use black magic to kill someone for you. I did really like this book, and I liked how it included characters from other Agatha Christie novels. It was kind of fun to see the universes colliding. The reason that I have this book a little higher on the list compared to some that are below it is because I did really like the dynamic between Mark and his sidekick Ginger. A little sleuthing duo is just one of my personal favorite mystery tropes, and so that bumped this book a little higher for me. Next, at number 13, I have Cards on the Table. This is another Poirot book, and actually one of the first Poirot books that I read after it was bought for me as a gift. In this book, Poirot is invited by this man named Mr. Shaitana to a card party. However, Shaitana actually invited 4 investigators to the party, as well as 4 people who got away with murder in the past. When Mr. Shaitana turns up dead in a locked room, it seems like only the 4 murderers could have done it. Which one of them killed him to keep their secret? I was kind of surprised to see that actually at the time I read this, I only rated this book 3 stars, and I think I actually have more positive memories of it in hindsight. Obviously, since there were only 4 suspects, it's not the most shocking Agatha Christie book, because when there's only 4 people who could have potentially killed the person, you know, you kind of suspect all of them. But I do think there were some moments where Agatha successfully misled me in this, and I do remember the characters more so than I do in some of the books that are lower on this list. So I do think I have fonder memories of this book in hindsight than I did at the time. I believe it's also the first book that Ariadne Oliver appears in. Ariadne Oliver is sort of Agatha Christie's spoof of herself. She is a mystery writer who created a fictional detective that is much like Poirot, and I just think it's really delightful for Agatha Christie to have created this sort of tongue-in-cheek version of herself. This is a book that definitely has grown in my esteem since I first read it. Next, I believe we're at number 12, and at that spot I have Murder at the Vicarage, which is the first Miss Marple mystery. To be completely honest, I wasn't entirely sure where to put this book in the ranking. This book introduces us to St. Mary Mead, the village where Miss Marple lives, and all of its colorful residents when the most hated man in town turns up dead. There is no shortage of suspects and people who might have wanted him dead. I could have ranked this book lower because it uses a technique that I do not really like when Agatha Christie pulls this stuff on me. It kind of makes me feel like she's not really playing fair with me, and I don't like it that much. So while I did not correctly predict who done it, I felt a little bit cheated at the end. However, I do think this book is a bit more memorable than some of the ones that came in at the bottom of this list, and this was the first Agatha Christie book I attempted to solve on my channel. I will link that video if you want to go watch it. I will just link my entire Agatha Christie playlist if you want to go watch all of my trying to solve videos. And I think because I had so much fun trying to solve this book, it does have some fond memories attached to it. It was a very fun reading experience. So definite pros and cons to this one. I tentatively put it in at this spot, but depending on the day, I could definitely see it going higher or lower. Next on the list at number 11, just shy of the top 10, I have Murder on the Links. This is the second Poirot book, and I liked this one. Objectively, it's not quality-wise one of Agatha Christie's best books, but I had fun reading it. In this book, Poirot and Hastings go to France after a man writes to Poirot saying that he thinks someone is going to kill him and he needs Poirot to come help him. But by the time Poirot arrives, his client is already dead. This book is a bit convoluted, and, you know, there are some coincidences, and maybe it's not the most believable of all of her books, but it was fun, and I had a good time while I was reading it. I know that there are some people who really like the books with Hastings in them, and other people who really hate the books with Hastings in them. And personally, I really like Hastings. I just find him very amusing, how he is so clueless and not self-aware, how he thinks to himself that Poirot is so lucky to have him around, when really Hastings has no idea what's going on a lot of the time. And that just really amuses me. I personally have a lot of laughs at his expense, and I wish that Hastings was in more Poirot books. So that definitely gives Murder on the Links a boost in my rankings. Now, coming in at number 10 is a book that is objectively one of Agatha Christie's most iconic books, but I'm going to explain why it is only number 10 for me. That is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. So this is probably one of Agatha Christie's most famous books, and it really created an innovation in the mystery genre that is so common today, but at the time was very unheard of. So why do I have it ranked only at 10 out of 22? And I think the reason is because this book was so hyped, and I heard many people review this book before I read it myself. While they did not spoil it for me per se, there were certain things that people said about it that I had in my mind while I was reading. So I think I was only on chapter 2 or 3 when I thought to myself, I bet this is the person who did it. And guess what? That was who did it. I think had I gone into this book blind, it could have been a 5-star. I could have been absolutely shocked by it. But there were just certain veiled comments people made about this book that made it pretty easy for me to figure out where the story was going, and that did dampen my enjoyment of it. Objectively, this is one of Agatha Christie's best books. I just think I was a little bit disappointed in it because of the things that people have said. My recommendation for you is, if you haven't read this book yet, go read it. Do not listen to anyone talk about it. Go read it and see it for yourself. You know, it wasn't outright spoiled for me, but sometimes people say things that aren't technically a spoiler, but you have them in your mind when you're reading, and it alters the reading experience. So that's really all that I can say about this. If you haven't read it, just go read it. Don't read any reviews. Don't listen to anyone talk about it, even if it's technically a spoiler-free review. Just dive in blind. I think that would be best. Next on the list at number 9, I have Lord Edgware Dies. And this is another book that I think is really well done, and it did surprise me in the end with the reveal of who done it. Again, though, it pulls a similar trick to some of the other books on this list that I personally do not love. But I feel like Agatha Christie got away with it in this book better than she did with some of the others. Like, I didn't feel as stupid when I got to the end, you know? So I think that's why this book is a little higher on my list than some of the others. This is another Agatha Christie book that I attempted to solve, and I had a lot of fun reading it and trying to figure out who the killer was. At number 8 on this list, I decided to put The Moving Finger. This is another Miss Marple book, and it takes place in a village called Limestock, where residents have recently been receiving some very lewd letters. One of the town's residents seemingly commits suicide after receiving a letter accusing her of infidelity. But did she actually kill herself, or was she murdered? I mean, I think you know the answer to that, because if she really killed herself, we wouldn't have a mystery. But this one was again kind of tricky to rank because I actually guessed who the murderer was before the end of the book. This is another one that I tried to solve on my YouTube channel. And normally I don't like it when I can guess the murderer before the end of a book. I like to be surprised. But I think this is still pretty high on my ranking because when I got to the end, I felt proud of myself for figuring it out, not disappointed thinking, oh my god, this was so obvious, like I felt in They Do It With Mirrors. You know, it's really tricky because when you're writing a mystery, ideally, in a perfect world, I, the reader, want to get to the end and be like, oh my god, I never saw this coming, but all of the signs were there. Amazing job. Of course, that doesn't always happen, and sometimes, you know, you get to the end of the book and you're like, I didn't see this coming, but there were no signs. This came out of nowhere. I didn't like this book. Other times you get to the end and you're like, yeah, it was really obvious who done it. And even though I did guess, I felt like Agatha didn't make it easy on me. Like, I felt like there were a lot of misdirects, and I felt like I had to work hard to guess who the killer was, so it was still satisfying, even though I wasn't surprised, if that makes any sense. I do think it was a well-done book, and I felt satisfied at the end, even though I knew who the killer was. Next, at number 7 on the list, I have The Mysterious Affair at Styles, the very first Poirot book. Now, this is another book that was spoiled for me, and this one was outright spoiled. I was listening to the All About Agatha podcast episode on Death on the Nile, and without any warning, one of the hosts gave a spoiler for this book, just outright said, in The Mysterious Affair at Styles, where X is the murderer, and I didn't have time to pause it before they said it. I was pissed, you know, like they just outright spoiled a unrelated Agatha Christie book that I had not read yet, and I tried so hard to forget what I heard, and I couldn't. So when I did finally read this book, I already knew who the killer was, which did dampen my enjoyment a bit. However, there were actually moments in this book where even though I knew who the killer was, Agatha kind of got me, and there was a moment where I kind of paused and was like, is it possible that I'm remembering the spoiler wrong? Is it possible that so-and-so didn't actually do it? And the fact that she was able to plant a seed of doubt in my mind, even for a moment after I'd already been spoiled, is what made me rank this book higher on the list. Thankfully, there actually was a little bit of a part of the ending that they hadn't spoiled for me, and so I did enjoy that. I think this book does have some clever elements to it, so I can't rank it that high because I was spoiled, but all in all, it was still a good book. Next on my ranking, I have Evil Under the Sun. This is another Poirot book where Poirot is going on vacation at the seaside, but of course, wherever Poirot goes, murder follows, and a guest at the resort turns up dead. I really enjoyed this book. I've actually read it twice. I reread it in preparation for this video because I did not remember it all that well. And while some things did come back to me as I was reading a second time, there were still things that I did not 100% put together, even though I'd already read the book before. I think that this book is just really well plotted, and I think the way the clues are laid is just very skillful. This is another book where even if you do figure it out, Agatha Christie is going to make you work hard for it. And one thing I really admire about Agatha Christie, and that I wish I could do as a mystery writer, is she is so good at clues. Sometimes when I'm reading Poirot, he points out something and is like, oh, that's really important. And I'm like, what? Like, Poirot, I have no idea how this fits into the murderer. And so I just really like how Agatha Christie is able to take these seemingly insignificant things and have them be a major clue in the mystery in the end. A lot of times when I'm reading her books, even if I have guessed who the murderer is or I'm on the right track, there are clues where I'm not really sure what Poirot gathered from them or how they fit in, and that's something I really like about her writing. Is the villain's plan a bit convoluted? Yes, but I think this book is just really enjoyable to read, and it's one of my favorite Agatha Christie's. Now, at number 5 on this list, I have the only short story collection on this list I have not talked about yet, and that is Partners in Crime. This is the second in the Tommy and Tuppence series, and the reason it's one of my favorites is I freaking love Tommy and Tuppence. Like I said, I love a sleuthing duo, and I love the relationship that Tommy and Tuppence have as childhood friends turned married couple. I love their banter and their dynamic with each other. There were multiple instances in this book where I had a big smile on my face or I laughed to myself while I was reading. Tommy and Tuppence are just some of my absolute favorite Agatha Christie characters, and that's why this book is so high on my list. I just felt like the two of them and their relationship was so memorable. This book just was a blast to read. It was so much fun, and that's why I am ranking it so high on this list. At number 4, I have a book that honestly probably should be lower on the list, but I personally have such fond memories of it, and I had so much fun while I was reading it, so that's why it's so high on my list. But it's The Secret of Chimneys. Objectively speaking, this is not one of Agatha Christie's most skillful books. It leans a little more thriller, but it was very memorable to me, and I loved the characters. Virginia Revel, she is iconic. There were moments in this book that genuinely made me laugh, and I just have such a soft spot for it in my heart. I loved this book when I read it. It brought me a lot of joy. And granted, it might also be higher in my rankings because I read this right after reading The Big Four, my least favorite Agatha Christie, so I might love it just because I read it right on the tail of reading such a bad book. So that might have given it a boost in my rankings. Objectively speaking, I know this is not one of Agatha Christie's best, but I just loved it. I just love the characters. There are moments that I can specifically remember in my mind, and it was just a lot of fun. That's what reading's all about, you know? It's supposed to be fun, and this book was fun. At number 3 on this list, I have The Secret Adversary, the first Tommy and Tuppence book. Again, objectively speaking, this book should probably be lower on the list, but it brought me a lot of joy when I read it and introduced me to Tommy and Tuppence, who, like I said, I absolutely adore. This book also leans a little bit more thriller, with Tommy and Tuppence getting involved with British intelligence, and you know, it's not like the most surprising. You know, at a certain point, it was clear to me who the bad guy was, but the characters were so memorable and so delightful that I just really have a fondness for this book and the enjoyment it brought me. Tommy and Tuppence, some of my absolute favorites. I love them. I love their dynamic. I love their banter. They are an amazing duo. Absolutely love Tommy and Tuppence. Now, coming in at number 2 on this list, my second favorite Agatha Christie novel is Murder on the Orient Express, another one of her most famous books. This is a Poirot novel, and it's just amazing. Now, I actually did go into this book already knowing the solution because I had seen the movie before. Yet, knowing the solution didn't dampen my enjoyment of this book. I loved seeing all the hints that she laid and how intricately plotted this book was. Even though I knew how it was going to end, I still immensely enjoyed every moment seeing Poirot get closer and closer to the solution. It's just an amazingly written book, a masterclass in mystery writing. It's iconic for a reason, and you know, I think it's a real achievement that knowing what was going to happen, I still gave this book 5 stars and enjoyed every moment of it. And now, number 1. There was absolutely not a doubt in my mind that this book was going to be number 1 because not only is it my favorite Agatha Christie, it's one of my favorite books of all time. It's also the first book I read by Agatha Christie, and so far none of her other books have been able to top it. My number 1 is 100%. And Then There Were None. This is a standalone novel, one of Agatha Christie's most famous books, and it is the best-selling mystery novel of all time. This book follows 10 people who all are invited to an island by a mysterious person, but upon their arrival, they realize they were invited here for nefarious purposes, and they start dying one by one. This book is absolutely brilliant. It is so well done. Probably the best written murder mystery I've ever read, and I've read a lot of them. There is a reason that so many people cite this book as an inspiration, write retellings of it to this day. This book is iconic, and anyone who wants to write a mystery or loves reading mysteries, you gotta check this book out because it is just amazingly written, honestly. All of Agatha Christie's talent shows through in this book, and she got me good at the end. There were so many moments where I didn't know what was going to happen next, where I thought that I'd solved it, but then she did something that made me doubt my thought process. It is absolutely amazing, and this book so far is far and away number 1 in my heart. So everyone, that is it. Those are my rankings of every single Agatha Christie book that I have read so far. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I had some hot takes, and some of you are probably mad at me for putting certain books so low. I'm sorry, this is just my personal opinion, you know, and sometimes I do think when a lot of people are telling you how amazing a book is, it can set you up for disappointment. Some of the highest rated books on this list are books that I went into with no expectations, and I think that helped me enjoy them more because I didn't have any preconceived notions of what they were going to be like. If you're still here, let me know in the comment section which of these Agatha Christie novels that I discussed in this video is your favorite? Which one is your least favorite? What Agatha Christie books would you like to see me read and try to solve next? I would love to hear from you in the comments. My social media links are down below if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more from me. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a tremendous rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you in the next video.